of the country once before I got up here, and that was to Canada on a business trip once. So you learn very quickly that there's another world out there, and that the United States plays a very important role in that world. And we have some serious issues facing our country. Now, having said that, I will tell you that I remain confident and I remain optimistic. I think we've got a lot of good people in Congress. You know, coming up here, you read all the polls about Congress being, you know, so disliked and just not popular. In fact, I went from being a member of the pharmacy profession, it was #2 most trusted profession in the country, to being a member of Congress, which was next to the bottom. So I went from the top to the bottom. But, and you know, you think, oh, there must be a lot of deadbeats up here, a bunch of deadbeats. But surprisingly to me, and encouraging to me, is the fact that there are a lot of people in Congress, a lot of smart people, a lot of people who want to move this country forward, and I'm very encouraged by that.
I want to come back to the debt issue, but you mentioned travel. In your first year, where have you gone?
Well, I had the opportunity to visit Cuba, which was a great trip, a great experience for me. I did that, and certainly that's important right now with everything that's been going on with United States-Cuba relations. And then I had the opportunity to travel to Israel, and Israel was a life-changing experience. My wife was able to go with me. We, you know, obviously it was during the time that we were negotiating the Iran nuclear deal, and we met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and certainly that was very important, and there were a lot of times that we met with political leaders, and that was the majority of our trip, but we also had the opportunity to see some of the historical sites. And, you know, being a Christian and a Methodist, it was just very, very emotional, and very, it was just a great trip for us, my wife and I, to be able to go and visit the land where Jesus walked. And we actually were baptized in the Jordan River, and that was quite an experience for us as well.
How important is religion to you?
Well, it's vitally important. I mean, God has blessed me in so many ways, and God has been with me all my life. And, you know, having grown up in the Bible Belt in South Georgia, you know, that's a big part of all of our lives. But I grew up in the church. I went to a Methodist school, and God has truly blessed me, and I recognize that and realize that, and I am thankful for all the many blessings that God's bestowed upon me and my family.
So let's go back to the debt and the deficit. The debt is in excess of $18 trillion. Mm-hmm. And if you take the budget, 2/3 Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security spending, and defense spending. Mm-hmm. So how do you bring down the debt? Some have argued cut spending, but also raise taxes. How would you do it?
Well, 3 things that we've got to do. First of all, we've got to cut spending. We have got to cut spending, and when I say spending, I mean discretionary as well as mandatory spending.
Including defense?
Well, that's a different area, because we've cut defense, in my opinion, too much. Sequestration, you know, when it was originally set forth, sequestration, I think, was self-discipline, if you will, for Congress to get something done, and unfortunately it hasn't worked in that respect. And I think we've reached a point now where we're getting to where we're reaching that dangerous level where we're cutting defense too much. But I've always said that we've got to cut spending. We've got to have entitlement reform. And thirdly, and most importantly, we've got to grow our way out of this. And we have to grow our way out of this, and we can only do that we can only have that growth by investing in our infrastructure and by having economic development. That's perhaps the most important thing, is for us to grow out of it.
But even if you do all of that, would you still need a tax increase to try to bring down the debt?
Well, I don't know that we would, and first of all, I'm not going to be in favor of tax increase, and, you know, never say never, but at the same time, I think there's enough area where we can have cuts in spending and cuts in entitlements to where we wouldn't have to raise taxes.
Where would you put yourself in the political spectrum?
You know, I have very conservative values. There's no question about that. Having been raised where I was raised and in the environment I was raised in, I think that you know, it's natural for me to have conservative values. I have, you know, my father worked in a paper mill. He worked shift work. He worked very hard. I was the first one in my family to ever go to college and the first one to graduate from college. And, you know, I learned the value of hard work through my dad, and I've had to work hard all my life, and I have, and I've been very successful. I've been very blessed and have had my own business, owned 3 drugstores, had an institutional pharmacy that I did very well with, and I've learned through hard work and through you know, working hard to save that you can succeed.
Are your parents still alive?
My dad is. My mom passed on June 21st of 2008, and still miss her every day. My parents were married for 50 years, and my mom passed when she was 70. My dad is 78 now. 2 years ago, he remarried. He remarried a wonderful lady who also lost her husband, lost her spouse. And they're doing quite well together, and we're very fortunate to still have him with us.
Is your dad surprised that you're in politics?
You know, although my dad was not in politics, he was very active in the community. He was actually chair of the recreation department when we were growing up, and he was very active with me, and particularly in recreation. And he always had an interest, although he never held any office or ran for any office or anything. But yeah, I think he's a little surprised, probably.
I assume that's a picture of you and your wife behind you?
Yes.
Where was that taken?
This picture behind us, that was actually taken on the speaker's balcony the night that we were sworn in. She was up here with us.
How did you meet her?
That's a great question. We met at Young Harris College. Zell Miller, who was former senator and a former Georgia governor, actually wrote a book called The Mountains Within Me, and he grew up in Young Harris and actually taught at Young Harris College. He described Young Harris College as being like a shoe factory because things come out in pairs, and we came out as a pair. We were actually chemistry lab partners, and she was a year ahead of me in school. I really didn't like her at first because she was so much smarter than I was in school, but she had an unfair advantage. Her mother was a teacher, and I always tell her that. But you know, we were chemistry lab partners in college, and we've been together ever since then.
Did you tell her you didn't like her at first?
Yeah, I tell her that all the time. She's still a lot smarter than me.
3 boys. What are their ages?
They are 30, 28, and 25, and their mother's done a wonderful job of raising them. They're fine young men. We're very, very proud of them. Our oldest son and our daughter-in-law both graduated from Washington Lee University. Spent a couple of years up in New York City and then gravitated back down to Charlottesville, Virginia. They've blessed us with twin granddaughters, identical twins. They're 26 months old now, and they are just a delight. And now my daughter-in-law is actually pregnant with our first grandson, so we're looking forward to that. Our middle son and our other daughter-in-law live in New Orleans, and they met at the University of Georgia, where they both graduated from. He followed her back to New Orleans. She's from New Orleans, and he was headed to law school and came home one day and said, "Dad, I think I want to be a chef." I said, "Oh boy." So a year and a half later, he came home and said, "Dad, I don't want to be a chef." So, and that's fine. But she went on to law school at Tulane and graduated and is doing great now. And he's back getting his master's degree from the University of New Orleans and working at the same time. So he's doing well. And then our youngest son, he is in Atlanta. And when I was in the state legislature, you know, I had a condo in Atlanta. Now he's got a condo in Atlanta. I don't know how that works. But anyway, that's the way that worked out. But he's doing exceptionally well. He's got a great job, and he's enjoying himself.
Understandably so, but a big smile on your face when you talk about your grandkids.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Mary Margaret and Adelaide, they are, you know, again, identical twins. And
how can you tell them apart?
It's not easy. In fact, my wife and I babysat a couple of them a couple of weeks ago, and we actually put them down in their crib and got up the next morning and realized that we had put them in the wrong crib. And, you know, it was only because we called one of them Adelaide. She said, "I'm Mary Margaret." Then we realized what we had done.
What is your routine here in Washington?
Well, first of all, I stay in my office.
So there's a cot directly behind you.
Yes, there is. But I remind you that it's a top-of-the-line cot. My wife spared no expense with that cot. I mean, it came from Bed Bath & Beyond. It's got wooden slats in it. It's got a firm mattress. I mean, it's top of the line. So I'm very proud of that cot. But I do sleep in my office, and you know, there are